Hey everyone, this is oh, already got the storytelling superpower thing up. Um, Welcome to StriderTalk. This is episode 1, and
Yeah.
everyone, this is we're super excited. I got a storytelling superpower thing up. This is so bad. Welcome to StriderTalk. Sorry, I gotta. This is episode 1, and
Yeah.
take over real quick. This is an emergency. Take over. I gotta figure out where my audio is coming
So
from. Bad.
So my name's John.
There we go.
All of you. If you might remember me from a stream where I, apropos of nothing, named myself Dat Boy and my sister Dat Squirrel, and now I realize that was might have been a bad first impression for unless somebody really likes squirrels. In that case, it was the perfect choice.
It was a
Not
fantastic
really good
first
for.
impression because we had a really interesting conversation. One of the more
No,
substantial.
yes, the conversation was good.
Yeah.
I'll give us that credit.
Yeah. Sorry, I got the audio figure out now.
Uh-huh.
I'm Matt C, by the way. Sorry, this is on Matt C's YouTube channel right now. I forgot to that live streaming capabilities don't kick in until 24 hours after you unlock that feature, so I'm going to be fixing that. This is going to be over at the StriderTalk YouTube channel in the future. Future episodes will be there as well. But yeah, we were just talking because we've done a couple, like I've done his podcast and he's done my live stream, and we've just had fun in the past communicating about storytelling, just kind of chatting about that, trying to think in our current year, I guess, about what storytelling means for people, how to do it effectively, how to find audiences effectively, kind of tease through what the differences between, like, I guess, like the perceived knowledge on how you're supposed to write and how you're supposed to find audiences and what actually works in this day and age, I guess, and how to, incorporate a thoughtful and robust worldview in light of all those things, I guess. So, and yeah, and we're both Christians, and that would be our worldview. But we're interested in figuring out how to. I told you I didn't tell you I was going to say this, but we're interested in trying to figure out how to do this in a way that actually reaches as broad of an audience as possible, and gives audiences what they want, a very broad audience, what they're actually want and interested in on a human level. And so I feel like that's something that maybe a lot of people are interested in trying to think through, but don't have a clear set of tools and tips for how to go about doing that, how to speak in a pluralistic society, and effectively in ways that don't just turn people off or offend people or make people feel insulted. How do you do that coherently while still, authentically kind of speaking from the perspective that you do have? So anyway, that's my impression of what StriderTalk is. What's your impression, John?
Well, first, I think to kind of summarize my background, I am a believer. I say that I'm burdened with glorious purpose. Um, that's a way for me to kind of express what uh, being a Christian is, as the term has been kind of deprecated and like politicized by different groups. So I'm a believer who believes that I am God's work of art, and so I all the things that I want to express, I feel like there's a way to express them that honors God. Um, uh, my uh, my day job is as a copywriter, and I'm kind of in between different contract roles, um, and I can do everything from copywriting to web production and graphic design. I work at Philadelphia. Um, I'm the author of Cain and Abel. Um, that's Caneable. And if you'd indulge me, I can share my screen here.
Yeah.
So this is the first book in the Seven Deadly Sins series.
Oh,
The
hold on.
idea.
I don't know if we're seeing your screen yet. Sorry. I
No
want to
problem.
derail you. Did you hit the thingamadoodle at the very bottom?
Yeah, I
Oh
think
no.
it should.
Are you serious?
Oh wait. Oh, okay. I need to click a different thing. That's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
proprietary. Okay.
Oh, we have Andy Hayes in the chat. Hey, Andy. Thanks for dropping by.
Okay.
We're just we're still knocking off a bit of the rough bits on how to use StreamYard, so bear with us figuring out how to share screens.
So I think I have it.
Oh, yep. You know what? There we go.
Aha. Yes. So this is Cain and Abel. It's a I have different kind of ways to talk about this, and I think my favorite way most recently is that it's moody media with a message. Because the last time we talked about like kind of gothic reads, it was to me it's there's a lot of God's immanence that is lost in a lot of Christian fiction. The idea that um, you know everything needs to be an allegory. So you have the main character is like this kind of perfect person who like is the kind of Captain America type figure that everybody kind of wants to be like, and I find that real life is not like that. And so
Sure.
the Seven Deadly Sins, the main kind of tension in it is like this character may end the book, you might end the book and they're not a Christian, or you might end the book and they might be beyond societal, or even like they might pity themselves by the end of the book. Like by their own definition, they failed. So I wanted to kind of use the Seven Deadly Sins series to go through each of the Seven Deadly Sins and explore them as rigorously as possible, much in the way that like Dostoevsky did in Crime and Punishment. The only difference being that all of these characters are in the young adult range. So I say that these are like for the young or the young at heart, meaning that an adult should be able to enjoy these books. But they're targeted at teens and young adults. And so the last bit is kind of what we've been working on. And I'll switch over to the last thing here. Let's see. I'll add. Sorry, there's not really an elegant way to.
No, yeah.
This, but
all...
so you're sharing the Etsy now.
Okay, got it.
There we go. So my vision for Strider that I'm going to be inviting Matt to join in on, and artists like him, is kind of a direct sales lifestyle brand. Because what I realized is that there are a lot of artists that want to just focus on their passion project. So for you, that's Kyrie. For other people, it might be, they want to focus on freelance work and illustration jobs and things that will actually pay their bills. In the meantime, I'm hoping Strider can be a outlet for people that have, a backlog of art that they really believe in, that happens to line it up with the kind of ethos that we imagine with fantasy, that it's like imagining a second world. It's kind of their internal world that they're projecting on to their to whatever canvas, and they can just submit things to put on this store, and it'll work kind of like, you know, any other channel like this, like Avon or something like that,
Yeah,
where like
great
the
idea.
it's kind of just a way to for them to order, like, things that they need to get sold, and it's a drop shipping back end. So it's a print on demand thing that they can advertise, and there's no cost for them, and I can take care of some of the administrative chores. As an author, I understand that like art doesn't always pay the bills. So if I can offer this for Christian and maybe even some non-Christian artists that believe in this kind of fantasy, believe in this kind of second world,
Yeah,
um, you know, type of ethos, to be able to submit and have art that they believe in available for the masses for on merchandise, that people, be it prints or iPhone cases or what have you. Um,
it's a brilliant idea.
so these are the types of things that like I feel like we're gonna develop more around. But um, I think here comes the fun part, where we just kind of talk about what we've been up to lately.
Yeah.
So you first.
Well, oh, by the way, Doug Garrett's in the chat. Thanks for
Oh,
dropping by, Doug. Big fan of the Doug cast. He asked, "Are you guys talking about the arcade, the classic arcade game Strider?" He loves that game.
oh,
We could. That could be an upcoming episode.
I don't remember that game actually. I feel
It sounds
like
familiar.
I'm losing in the culture.
I know. I know. Well, there's so much. I mean, aren't we all losing in the culture? There's so much to keep up with. Everyone's losing. It's just a matter of how much. Um,
True.
I mean, so just to catch everyone up, Doug was asking what are we talking about, and one of them was just like a merchandising platform for exploring. Well, you describe it because I think you did beautifully. Like, how would you summarize it in a sentence?
Well, I think the slogan "Uncommon Goods for the Common Man" as a way of showing that
Beautiful.
there are esoteric genres such as really hard sci-fi, really deep fantasy, high fantasy, and I feel like those artists have limited themselves to like, well, only hardcore fans will be interested in this is something very personal to me because it's inspired by like my reading of this text or that text, or like you dealing with something of historical fiction.
Yeah.
um, there's these things where you're like, okay, this is a very, this is my interpretation of this thing. But like me going through your deviant art, I just see really beautiful art, and I also see that you've done it in such a way that just a layman who wants to have, um, a really like graphic rendering of, you know, um, a cityscape or what have you, would be interested in having your art. So I think that Strider is a way of getting those people in those esoteric genres to have an outlet where they can do merchandising, and I take some of the administrative burden, and um, I also kind of use copywriting and things to curate their merchandise, and um, it's a partnership that I feel like benefits us both because I'll get a small cut of it,
Yeah.
and um, but I'm also bringing the type of art that I like, the type of art that has like a reference to some good literature or a reference to some like personal um, interpretation of the world. I'm able to give that to more people, and
Yeah.
that's something that excites me.
You mentioned trans pagan as a term, which I
Oh
was
yeah.
very interested in
Okay.
and have no idea. Like, is that like a new? Is that a neologism? Did
Yes,
you
I
invent that?
actually. Okay, so a good example that we might touch on a little bit later,
Mm-hmm.
but or even in a different episode because
Yeah.
it's such a rich show. But I came up with an idea around this because like we so on my podcast Unboxing Story we had talked about how C.S. Lewis took like the god of Jove, that idea.
Yeah.
He had a version of Father Christmas that was jovial, and it was a way of for kids showing this attitude towards the world. Right? It was a
Mm-hmm.
very uh, low fidelity way of expressing a high fidelity idea. Right? And
Yeah.
so
Like a sevenfold, like a cosmological, like it's a 7-part dimensional way of talking about the same God, I
exactly.
guess.
So
Yeah.
I think that's the linchpin to it is that, like for example, when there was the satanic panic happening in the
Mm.
80s, there was
Mm-hmm.
this kind of thing of like we don't want to argue with our kids about what these things mean or spend the
Mm.
time to explain them. So we're just going to say don't play that devil game, right?
Yeah.
So
Or
it,
even I've found it like just talking with friends about C.S. Lewis, they'll be like, "Isn't that he's that guy that was kind of into some really weird stuff, right? Like, didn't he have like satyrs in one of his stories?"
oh
I'm
no,
like, "Yeah, you mean the story about Jove with the like? Of course he'd have satyrs in the Jovian Christ story called "The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe." But
right?
that
So yeah,
that conversation doesn't go far.
right. So I think the idea that I have, and there might be a word for it in the academic space, just haven't heard of it. But the idea that you can look at it, I was going to talk about the Messiah show that just came out on Netflix.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
seems like the idea, as far as I can tell so far, is that they've introduced a character who claims to be Christ,
yeah.
but is specifically not it's not an allegory for the second coming. It's not hitting all those benchmarks of, okay, then there's this passage in Revelations, and this is what we're going to do with that. It's just literally giving you an example of a Christ figure that is specifically acting aberrant just by definition of the word. There is a second coming, but he's chose Palestinians instead of Jews. All this different stuff. But
Oh
I
wow.
think it's still making commentary on the Christian belief.
Oh
It's
sure.
saying
Yeah.
it's basically saying like, okay, so this is our version of this thing. Now you can reassess what you believe based on this. And
Mm-hmm.
I think you can get versions of this maybe that are more strident than others,
Mm-hmm.
and are maybe reaching, like for example, there's an artist Audrey Assad who did a version of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, but
Mm.
changed the lyrics to be about peace.
Oh
So
wow.
that I would think is like that is a political statement. She's saying,
Yeah.
you know, this is something that was about war. We're gonna make take it a full 360 and make it a symbol of peace and hope. And still, you can still make the case that it's still a worship song, like it didn't go full pagan with it. But I'm very very intrigued in kind of like this postmodern era of publishing that
Mm.
there are those types of things happening where you see something and it's obviously not allegorical, it's obviously not doesn't have the same perspective that the institutional church usually would like, but it's still dealing with the meaning behind things and trying to say like, okay, this is something that we want to make a comment on religion, but we're
Mm-hmm.
taking some symbol and or some emblem or some um, version of this story. And I mean, because I did that with Cain and Abel, um, I'm
Yeah.
interested in seeing how that has evolved.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
I
wonder how.
feel like I took this away from lighter
No, no,
lighter
no.
discussions.
That's fine. I think there's enough of a bridge there to segue into our main topic
Hmm.
in terms of, I guess, the sort of subjects that uh, people want told, that people that are greenlit, that are worthy of discussion and worthy. Some people consider worthy of greenlighting, and that
Right.
we want to discuss. So yeah, so just take it away. Like what do you want? What's episode 1 about?
Oh well. I had mentioned that it was strange to me that Bookgate has not happened yet, and
Hmm.
I think my main. I mean, it seems like all the other gates that have happened have had some kind of like um, they've had a lot of collateral damage. So I don't
Yeah.
necessarily think that, like, oh, well, let's make this happen and ruin some people's lives or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
But
We
I
if
think that,
it's good when there's no gate.
right. And I think that I think that there have been ensuing discussions that to me are about how does independent publishing affect this genre, or how does a lot more access that independent companies or individuals have affect this genre? Um, and with the
Hmm.
idea that um, I'm going to do a talk in a few weeks about this,
Yeah.
that the 50% of the marketplace for movies and books and I think it was movies, books, and TV shows has opened because of Amazon, Netflix, and we didn't. It wasn't really imagined before that 50% was available at all. We just assumed that 20% belonged to the uh,
Hmm.
big dogs, and that 80% was this kind of descending curve
Hmm.
um, that you
Hmm.
could expect. But now that 50% is open, I feel like a lot of the mediums are experiencing, like, okay, how do we, like, for example, Jimmy Fallon doing like YouTube style games in order to stay
Hmm.
relevant. That's a good emblem of like how has YouTube affected TV. I
Oh
feel
yeah.
like I feel like that is occurring maybe in private sectors with books. Um,
Hmm.
and but it's strange to me that it just feels like, okay, a lot of independent bookstores are closing, and
Yep.
there's pretty much Barnes and Noble, and maybe Borders and Walden Books and some major stores, but there isn't necessarily a lot of discussion in BookTube or online around like what could we be doing with literature now, or what could we be saying differently, that I feel like is happening with Comicsgate and with
Yeah.
Gamergate and those types of things.
Yeah. Well, I guess sometimes I wonder. I think literature isn't the target of popular interest enough
Hmm.
to uh, for there to be cultural forces at work to want to channel, like, just book publishing in general into some sort of I don't know, to make a particular cultural message that would that would lead to a backlash of a gate situation, that would lead to a lot of uh, collateral damage and all that, like you said. But interestingly enough, like I wish I had some tabs open on this. I've heard things about like young adult like sci-fi fantasy stuff getting a little weird. There was a woman who wrote a high fantasy novel about, I think it was early last summer, and a reviewer in the New York Times or something said that she was I don't you might have heard about this, but there was slavery in her fantasy story, but it was not based on race. It was like an economic slavery, and someone said that
Okay.
that was not appropriate. Um, and so she like it that's kind of desensitizing real readers to what slavery really is today,
Uh,
according to the person writing the review. And so she preemptively took her book out of publishing before it even went to the printer. She was just kind of making the rounds, letting people know this book is going to come out, and then she just canceled. She had a day job, so she was like, "Well, I'll just go back to that." It was, isn't so. There are things like that at work, I guess, but I don't think it's enough to be a gate because I don't think the industry's boutique enough. I mean, this is just me thinking. You know more about this than I do. I don't think the industry's boutique enough, and I don't think that popular culture is focused enough to want, you know, to want it. The power, people of influence, to want it to be a particular political arm, a particular message or social concern. But that's just
yeah,
me. I don't know.
I agree. I think that and
Yeah.
what saddens me is that I feel like at a sociological level, there's a lot that like long form writing does to encourage thoughtfulness, just in general.
Well, that's a
And
nice way to think of it. Yeah, I like
I
that.
think that I think that's what's the I think that there's this kind of like weird um, snake eating its own tail thing where personally, like I feel like walking into a bookstore, there's a lot of like self-help nonfiction, and
Yep.
there's a lot of just like kind of brain candy or like and um, this idea that like literature should be consumable that I
Hmm.
personally feel like should change. And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
I had kind of brought this up as we were kind of forming, feeling out the show and what it should be called, what it should talk about. Um, and I
Yeah.
kind of landed on this being a good topic that what like I feel like writing should be challenging and it should encourage you to rethink things. And so the
Hmm.
danger that I feel as a believer is like you were kind of saying this on Twitter that like trying to push things toward your vision makes it seem like you're trying to make the world in your image, right? So there's this I kind of feel
Yeah.
this tension as an author of yeah, I want to push people to like I have hats that I'm going to sell at this convention that make young adult um, make young adult great again.
Yeah.
um,
Sure.
because my idea is that I grew up with stories like Catcher in the Rye
Yeah.
and um, the and Lord of the Flies and things like that. And
Yeah.
obviously, those are difficult books to read, but that's the kind of writing that resonates with me. The idea that like you shouldn't be reading just for entertainment when there's so much power in reading to force you to think over something over an extended period of time. And
Hmm.
some of the best books change you as a person, like Fahrenheit 451
Yeah.
radically changed how I think. Like I read Shakespeare at a very early age, and
Yeah.
that was stuff that changed me as a person. Um, so I feel I think it was this topic was a way to get that rant in there. But
Yeah.
as seeing as you just did a print run of your comic, was there something about getting it in a physical form, or at least collecting it in general, that you felt makes it different than you just monetizing it as a webcomic?
Well, getting it printed has been very strange. It's been a long process. There was a failed Kickstarter to get it printed. And it took me 2-ish years to draw it. And before that, even there was years and years of trying and failing to even start something reasonable, something that clicked, that felt like it had a decent enough script to draw, and that I was interested in drawing, spending that much free time to create. But honestly, like, the printing part has been really weird, because at the beginning, this, like, talking 10 years ago, when I really got seriously into, it was kind of jumping out of storyboarding from undergrad into comics and liking anthology. There was kind of like an anthology boom in the mid to late 2000s.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, and Flight anthology, Kazu Kibuishi kind of basically started it, basically invented that revolution. And then there were so many people jumping in, and I wasn't good enough. I was too green, but I was totally invested at that point, because I could see what stories did, and I loved the fact that you could hold it in your hands and it felt substantial. And it was, I always liked short stories anyway, because it's like, it was very evident to me that you can get away with a lot when you write a really long story, but you can't get away with anything when it's a very short story. Every word counts. There has to be no fat. And so in order to do like a 12-page short story, you really have to be at the top of your game, and the medium itself has to be on top of its game in order to handle that much weight for people to be satisfied with a super short comic. And I found that I was, very frequently satisfied. A lot of these people were coming from storyboard backgrounds, and they just did some comics, on their side for these anthologies. So I guess they really had a strength when it came to, boarding out dialogue and emotion, and kind of really selling you a character really quickly. But that was kind of the gold standard for me, especially. It wasn't even webcomics. It was, though there were a lot of great webcomics at that time. It was kind of a boom too, but it was really anthology books. But now that all that to say, now that my first book's printed, it feels a little vulgar. It feels a little strange, I gotta say. Like, like it's just there now. It just exists. Like it's just this brute fact. Like I can't go back and change pages like I could do for years. I can't just kind of perpetually tweak things in this never-ending cycle of revising. Now it just is, and it's literally out of my hands now. It's literally in other people's hands, and it's a shocking. It feels very violent in a way, to like kind of be in your digital world for so long. And I do everything digitally for this comic. Right. So there's the first time this became physical is when it came back from the printer. That's the first stage is the last stage. The first physical stage is the last stage. So it's very it's weird, and it's bittersweet. And there's that I guess it's like the summer after your first year of college. Like you're kind of thinking, what was that I just went through? Now I feel like I'm sitting in my hometown thinking like, whoa, what are all my friends up to? Like, did all that really happen? Like, do I have the energy to go back to school? Can I do this again? That's the feeling that right now, trying to get out of that slump of getting energized for the next book, the next physical product, continuing to stay jazzed about this project that I like.
Yeah, and I think
very exhausting. So.
I think there is a morbid sense of me like railing against that, in the sense that like there's this pervasive feeling that having a physical book is like you have a relic, or you have not a relic, you have a artifact. Like, this proves that I did a thing. I made a book.
Yeah, which was always the goal, and yet I think in the world of living on the internet, like so much of our generation, especially younger, are doing, is that it always feels like the perpetual present when it's the internet. But now my book is already slipping into the past, if that kind of makes sense. So there's that. There's a permanence that actually locks down into a particular time. You know, it has copyright 2019 on it. Like it's fixed itself into a point in time, and that time is drifting backwards. This is this is really
yeah, and I think you really, even though it comes from a personal place for you, I think it's a very objective idea that publishing has changed to where you expect to have something new on a more regular basis. So I think maybe the idea of producing a book has become like this thing of like, well, this is really just like for example, one of the things that encouraged me to indie publish is a book called Write, Publish, Repeat, and the main like idea behind it was, okay, there is this new thing, this new boom of indie publishing, rather than think of this as, okay, I'm going to spend the next 10 years crafting the most perfect book ever created.
Yep.
Just get it to the point where it needs to be, publish it, and then repeat. And then that's how you can, on a very mercenary level, monetize this thing, because this has changed. So how they actually publish is they take a book idea or a premise of a series, and they divide it into like what they call seasons, and each book is like an episode in a mini series almost. And so they put out ebooks almost like novelettes in an epic kind of like Lord of the Rings, only the Lord of the Rings that they're putting out is the size of a normal, of a traditional novel.
Nice. Just like a couple hundred pages or something.
Right. And so that kind of brings me to, and I think it brings us to the kind of what we're kind of working on now portion. And because what I've kind of decided to do is, in order to keep myself writing regularly and to kind of revise my mindset around how I market myself and what I consider a finished thing, I'm kind of retrofitting myself to back in high school when I was working on comics. I had a comic called The Fascinating Flyboy, and it was a awful Frankenstein of Batman and Spider-Man, because I couldn't choose just one. So I had to have a brooding, traumatized person who also makes quips and
to deal with the pain.
Yeah,
I like it.
So, but all that to say that, like, doing comics, there was this idea of like, oh, you can put out a thing once a month, and it's like this is a way of having some kind of like, it was the grains of like, this is how a person who wants to write stays relevant. They put out something regularly. So my idea is that I have a story called White Devil that I had toyed around with my friend Jason, who made this piece of art back here that I'm going to have for sale at Evil Expo.
Oh, cool.
More about that in a minute. But just this to get this out about White Devil. We had started to work together, and I really ran out of funds to be able to pay him for the art as it was being produced.
Sure.
So I've decided to start a novel on Tapas. And do it in installments once a week. I was hoping to get the first episode out by the time we went live.
Cool. Yeah.
But I'm hoping for every time that we tape that I will have another installment of White Devil available for consumption.
Oh yeah, it
and
sounds neat.
it's a way of fleshing out the story, making it so that you lovely listeners and viewers will be able to get a taste of my style. It is kind of like if Hemingway wrote thrillers. Um, so
Oh,
uh,
cool.
and
So
it's
very
the basic
sparse,
premise. Yes,
efficient.
yeah.
Yeah.
It takes me a lot to go from like, the duck swam to talking about its feelings and emotions. I just want to like, this is what happened. Um,
I like
uh,
it.
but yeah, the basic premise is Ned and his dog Bill Murray fight for survival in a world where monsters control the government. Um, that's the basic pitch.
I like it. That's a good pitch.
So
Just
what banter do you have to kind of get this into a more
yeah.
effervescent space?
I've been working. Let's see. I switched it over on the YouTubes, but I got to do it for you too.
Uh,
Been working on a poster. So this is how I'm getting myself in the right mindset for working
oh,
on.
okay, cool.
Yeah, working on book 2 is a very nice guy on Twitter. Well, I guess he found out about my comic from on just the Twitter indie comics community and bought a copy, liked it. He's been trying to get his niece reading, and he said this was just the right sort of thing that she really enjoyed. In particularly, he's been trying to get her to like comics, and there's just not a lot out there, I guess, for younger readers.
Oh,
You know how
okay,
U.S.
quick,
comics
quick
are.
side note that I came up against that because my nieces like Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're in the like 6 to 10 range.
Yeah.
And so when I went to try to get an all ages Guardians of the Galaxy book, they were all like PG-13. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what the heck? These like everybody loves Baby Groot and Rocket Raccoon. You got to give them something to read. So
Yeah.
I can
It's so
second that.
bottlenecked. It's so bottlenecked. So yeah, so he did an amazing job. He drew this fantastic art, and I'm trying to color it, and I'm gonna pay him. He just did some fan art, just drew some art, and then just added me, and which is incredible. This is the sort of thing that I love. This is what
Right.
we all kind of live for, and that someone would just be like, "Oh, this is nice. I'm gonna invest creatively." And kind of participate in your storytelling, I guess, and so yeah, I'm gonna buy the thing off of them so I can make a poster out of it and hopefully offer it for the book 2 campaign. So it's been fun to kind of do that, I guess, and it gives me kind of a break from drawing panels and
So
doing
what
pages.
what you're saying is he did basically I don't know.
Oh yeah.
This is my knowledge of like having done the comics that I did in high school. So he did the pencils and the inks, and you did you did like digital colors on it.
I'll show you. He did this beautiful base,
Oh, aha.
which is incredible, and I'm trying to do justice to this, which is not easy. I may not have figured it out. I think I'm gonna probably try multiple versions just to figure out something that is respectful enough.
Yeah, I saw this. I saw the exchange on Twitter.
Oh yeah, yeah,
It is awesome to see it in all its glory again.
yeah. It's cool. It's yeah. So I'm trying to color it and do something fun that's like.
But I mean,
don't know.
in this one, I just really what is cool to me is like you captured that old style of movie poster, because it's just funny having listened to the few episodes of Red Letter Media that I have
Yeah.
that have like they usually focus on like horror and sci-fi stuff, but
Mhm.
every now and again you'll get something that's like a like the 80s fantasy where like most of it's like basically an exploitation movie that just
Yeah.
happens to be set in an esoteric or an ancient time. Um,
uh,
so like, but when I look at like the posters for 'em, it looks like that. So I
oh,
think
good.
it's in a good place.
I was thinking of 70s exploitation films, like
Uh,
bridging into 80s, and but also like thinking, trying to be mindful of. I guess like he almost has like a anime look that he gave to Myra, the female character,
uh,
and so I'm just trying to think like, yeah, what if this was, it's almost like it's the art on a cartridge for your Super Nintendo game
oh,
that
right.
doesn't look like this when you play it, but it looks really cool, and he bought
You
it for the
I
art.
think you could also say that like with like the Japanese reaction to like um like with something like Akira being like
Yeah,
a very grimy um noir thing,
yeah.
it kind of has to me a feeling of that of like there's it's this interpretation of this
Oh,
thing. It,
funny.
um
Yeah,
but anyway, but yeah,
I definitely.
I'm this I really like.
Thanks. Yeah, so that's where I'm at, and okay, stop sharing screen. I thought, okay, so just on the back end of things, I thought we'd play a game.
Oh, cool.
I told you I wouldn't. I told you that I wouldn't tell you what this was. But we could ask. We've got, I believe, 4 or 5 people hanging out with us right now, which is nice of them. Thanks for being here.
Hello, everybody.
I know there's other streams on tonight, so the fact that you're here, maybe you're here and there at the same time, but the fact that you're here means a lot to us. I thought we could pull the chat and ask them. We've got 2. Okay, I've got to find them. We've got 2 poll. We've got 2 like online quizzes. You know those stupid quizzes that you do, and then it tells you like what.
What Disney princess you are?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not saying I did that one
basically. Yeah.
or anything.
Yeah. Andy Hayes, welcome back to the chat. Okay. So I've got, are you a good storyteller? And then I've got, what is your storytelling superpower?
Oh,
I did storytelling superpowers. Actually, that's my personal favorite because it actually asks you questions about classic lit, which is kind of neat.
oh, cool.
This one I did slightly less. It feels a little more like Teen Vogue, but I thought it'd be kind of. This is like our cool down session because we're gonna be big brained here for most of our episodes, but we just kind of have fun. Yeah, that desktop makes me OCD. Did you see my desktop? Sorry. It's insane. I just screen cap all day. It's terrible. Sorry, Andy. So what do you guys want? If put a 1 in the chat if you like. Are you a good storyteller? First question is. Here's one of the question examples. Do you have any regrets? A, when I lied. B, when I lost 50 pounds. That's a. This is an old. Wow, is this before the euro? I don't know what's going on there. And C, when someone said they hated me for what I really am. Oh gosh, that could get really deep. I don't know how
Oh
fun that
no.
is. Or maybe we just go with this. Do a 2 in the chat if you want. What's your storytelling superpower? This is a little lighter.
Okay.
I already
This will
did the
let us
whole.
know what type of audience we can expect.
Yeah.
Whether they want to torture us or
Both only take a couple minutes, so.
in the meantime,
Yeah.
there is some good news on the just life front.
Yeah, please.
Melissa got a publishing deal.
Wow! Congratulations, Melissa. That's fantastic.
So for those of you who weren't here for the last show, my sister Melissa, who was the one that introduced me to Shakespeare and writing and everything. We've been doing a podcast, Unboxing Story, where we unpack fiction without the friction. That's our slogan. And she has been working on a high fantasy fairy story for the past, maybe 3 years, 3 or 4. And yeah, she got the message the other day that they were going to be sending a contract over, and she doesn't seem horrified by it. So, yeah, it's really rewarding to have the person that got you into writing in the first place, having such a good, boon. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm excited, and obviously you all will know when the prospective publishing date is 2021.
Nice.
So
We're gonna have to interview her on the process of what it
okay.
was like to actually go through a publisher,
Yeah,
that whole experience. Because I know a lot of people are interested in what actually that looks like, behind
right.
the scenes. That's great.
Yes. Very much joy in the Matos house.
Yeah.
Oh, and we will also both be at Evil Expo. It's January 24th to 26th. If any of you in the chat are in the tri-state area of Jersey, Delaware, PA, it's going to be at Piscataway, New Jersey. And the reason I brought this print out is that it's going to be available there, but it's also up on the Strider or the Strider Co store on Etsy. If you want to get that for the asking price of $65. It's a really dope print of what Jason calls a Grubelak, destroying, or maybe not destroying, maybe it's like a King Kong type thing. Let me actually pull it down so the viewers can see it a little bit better.
Yeah. Let's get a bigger.
Put this up. There we go.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So yeah,
that's very nice.
We had started to work on the comic White Devil together, and I really liked how, giving him different instructions about, okay, this is like a new take on a vampire. He would kind of take that and really do a lot of interpretive work on it, and he really had this original sense of illustration, and it's very highly detailed. So it was cool to work with. So if you guys want to go to the Strider Co store and get a canvas print of that, they're available now.
Cool. Yeah, we'll put the we should put the link to the Strider store in the show notes for the video.
Yeah, and I think in future episodes, I think there's a feature on YouTube where you can just have links pre-filled in. I don't know how that integrates with live streaming, but I'm pretty sure it'll basically auto-populate for next time. But yeah, I'm just excited to be able to go to Evil Expo, because as I've kind of said to my friends and family and people who care about my my writing process, marketing process, it was cool to find a expo or a con of some kind where it wasn't really a horror convention, just I guess the term is villain punk.
Villain punk. Interesting.
Yes. Because it's run by Jeff Mock, who has done the Steampunk World Fair in the past.
Oh, neat.
And I kind of like thinking of Evil as a speculative element, as opposed to, so you're going to a convention for freaks, or where they're going to talk about horror movies. It was a nice way of me to be able to market a book where
I love it.
That has an anti-hero as the main character.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on that. That sounds cool. Okay, so it looks like the ones have it,
Aha.
which I am grateful. That means storytelling superpower, and I think you'll like this one too if you're ready for it.
Sure.
Um, this is so I'm going to be quizzing you. Okay.
Oh, all right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'm all
Okay.
for it. Let me put this back up. Okay. Ready.
Okay. So choose a season. Let's make sure you can see. Can you see what I'm doing? You got this?
Are you here with me?
I'm
Right now.
zoomering. Let's make sure. Okay.
Yeah, it's not sharing the screen yet.
Oh my gosh, this is so terrible. Promise I'm gonna do better next time. Okay. You should be able to see it now. Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
All right.
So I need you to choose a season: spring, summer,
I
fall, or
like
winter.
winter personally.
Winter.
I
Okay.
am in. Yes.
All right. Choose a favorite book. This is
Oh, okay. So this is a literary portion of this.
yes.
Okay.
So
Let's see.
Gone with the Wind, Harry Potter, To Kill a Mockingbird, The Fault in Our Stars by John Green. That's
Ooh, that's yeah. So I'm gonna talk. That's another part of the Evo Expo appearance.
yeah.
We're gonna record an episode of Unboxing Story about the bad boys of YA, and
Oh, neat.
that's gonna pop up in that. So
Yeah.
that's another thing to look forward to.
Very relevant. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I like that there's. Ooh, the outside. Holy, this is.
I know. It's there's a lot. There's the best of here, but it's a good. There's a broad smattering. You know, it's a good.
Yeah, because I had to read Outsiders for school
Mm-hmm.
at one point, and I thought it was a pretty good read. So I think if you can scroll
Even
back
more.
up.
Oh, back up.
Yeah, back.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
scroll back. I think it's between.
Persuade. I never even heard of Persuasion by Jane Austen. It's one of
I've,
the lesser
I've,
known.
I've seen it. Like, it's anecdotally, I know of it, but I haven't read it or
Yeah.
even seen an adaptation of it. I would say probably To Kill a Mockingbird.
I know the choices. I really like Robinson Crusoe at the time, but that's a little.
Oh, no, I haven't read. I read Treasure Island, but I haven't read Robinson Crusoe.
I think it's the only semi-realist story in this whole.
You know, I think I'm
maybe
going to go.
Outsiders.
I think I'm going to go with the Great Gatsby.
Oh wow, good choice. Good choice.
Okay.
Which of these characters would you most want to write about?
Okay.
And this is just looking at images alone, no other context.
Oh, I think I recognized the cover from Old Man in the Sea.
Oh really? Is that what's going on?
I think that's the one. Yeah, the one that you're hovering over.
Yeah.
I made the poor choice of sitting further away from the screen. Okay, let me lean in here. Hello, everyone.
Don't worry, they can't see you. You can pick your nose and be alright.
Oh, I think maybe the one that actually stuck out to me was the one to the left of the Old Man in the Sea.
Yeah, okay. The little like paperboy.
Yeah, because it's a very good composition in general
Intriguing.
as a photograph.
It's got the most contrast. Yeah.
Yeah.
The value range.
But I like that idea of like him. Yeah, because like I haven't actually read much about Newsboys or about like the 20s or 30s, and so that would be fun to write about. I think.
Yeah. Yeah. About
All right,
boys
go with that one.
thing. Okay, so what would you rather watch?
Oh, okay.
We're almost to the end.
Huh. Oh, I remember my rant about Field of Dreams, about like angels and baseball. Okay,
Yeah.
that was a very intriguing one. I'd only seen that for the first time a few months ago, and that
What
was
a weird cover for like imagine like that's how you're gonna sell like that's your poster.
Okay, so what they missed the opportunity of putting like red, those red stitches on the like they could have had that
On
behind
the
him, and
moon.
then it would have been like, yeah, like it would have been like you know that it's about baseball in
They
a
would have done that back then. That's totally a early '90s move, late '80s move. Or whatever.
okay. I think
What is he leaning against anyway? Yeah.
I don't think that's one of those like bad Photoshop like posters where
Yeah.
they're like it's an unnatural pose because they're just making them do something generic and then they're gonna put them on something. Anyway, talk about the cover at a later date. I think. See, this is bad because I want to give the answer of like that will give me the best result, but that's different than saying what I would
No.
actually want to watch.
Yeah, it's like there's always that dilemma, like what should you pick versus what would you like to pick. There's always that tension.
I think, as somebody from Philadelphia,
Rocky.
I haven't seen it in a while,
Oh,
so I would
that's
probably pick.
great. That's
Yeah.
the one you should have picked. What's your favorite time of day? We are at 5 of 7, so it gets easier from here. So that's sunset, midnight, sunrise, or midday.
Favorite time. I think I'm gonna. This is very emo, but I think I'm gonna go with midnight.
I like it. Which setting would you most want to write about? So this is just judging on raw pictures,
Right.
just the imagery.
Bottom left.
Okay. Like the Egyptian ruins, look like Ptolemaic.
Yeah.
I think I picked that one too. Do this. Pick an image that speaks to you. Just pick an image. Hope you like it.
Oh, but they like most of them do.
Yeah.
Because I like the Lego guy.
Yeah.
I
So
Legos.
weird.
But I also really like Tesla coils.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm gonna go with the Tesla coil.
Is that what that's called? I just thought it was like the sciencey globe thingy. Like I thought the Tesla coils were like.
I
those
believe the
huge-
first time that anybody interacts with that thing, that's what they think it's called.
Yeah.
That's what I thought it was called. But my sister is my sister, and so once. Oh, and what do we
Here's
got?
the result. You got the same as me, even though you picked different things from me. So now
Ah.
I think this quiz is suspect. But your superpower is writing superheroes. So we still don't know what the other options would have been because we both got the same. Your favorite characteristics or characters see their world in danger, and you will do whatever it takes to protect it, and those they love in it. These characters may not wear spandex or capes, but they show almost superhuman fortitude in their quest to prevent disaster, whatever the cost to themselves. From Scarlett O'Hara to James Bond to Iron Man. I don't think of Scarlett O'Hara like she's protecting herself more than anyone else. To Iron Man and her estate. You're drawn to characters who stand up to the forces of evil and protect what they believe in. So that's a pretty good assessment there. That's nice. That's a good one. I think you can be proud of that result.
Yes, a Byronic hero, maybe, but a hero nonetheless.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I was gonna say like that might be the first time someone ever talked about Byronic heroes, but some in this particular thing. But I was surprised by that's what made me stick with this particular quiz is that it was like the question 2 or 3 actually spans 300 years of modern literature to quiz you. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, no, that was fun.
Yeah. Okay, so that was my silly contribution. You came up with the interesting, serious topic, so I came up with the silly.
And we didn't even get to we had paid lip service to talking about The Mandalorian and The Witcher,
Yeah.
and in the back of my mind, I know at some point I want to ask you about your relationship with comic books, because on the last live show that we did, we kind of talked about how you were raised with the European comics and you never even looked at American ones. That's kind of my relationship with manga was
Oh
that
yeah.
like when I was in school, there weren't anybody really reading, like there were a few only reading American comics, and a lot of kids were reading manga. So I had this kind of feeling of like, you traitors, like there's an American tradition here, and you're allowing it to fall by the wayside. Um,
Yeah.
but I think the both of those will be good for a
Yeah.
future episode.
I think it might take a full episode for me to satisfactorily dunk on the American comic book industry for being as narrow, artificially narrow of a market as it is, and
Uh,
it goes all the way back to the comic code
right,
of the
right.
1960s, and uh, there being a very diverse and healthy and as pluralistic as the European and Asian markets are in America until that happened.
Right.
And so
I
it's
think if there's anybody who can persuade you to see some light in that
I
like
would like that.
centrifuge, I think I could do it. But the fact that I don't really read very much of it anymore will kind of show that my um, my interest waned uh, uh, directly after high school. But yes, there were a lot of bright spots I think in between there. So for future episodes.
Yeah, yeah. If you're gonna recommend Watchmen, um, we're burning this show down. No, it's
I
fine.
high
It's
school
fine.
High school John was a fan.
That's fine.
Um,
Everyone
adult
was.
adult John sees uh sees the kind of, I think Scott McCloud put it well that like comics were in its adolescence,
Hmm.
and I think there are people that might be like, okay, this 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 needs to grow in these areas, and this needs to like regress in these other areas. Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot to say about it. But
Yeah, but
for
there
any,
had already been if I mean correct me if I'm wrong, but like there had already been Dark Knight Returns and stuff like this. Like uh, the '80s like had already gone dark and adult in different ways, and I feel like Watchmen was kind of like uh, such a successful criticism of superheroes as a genre to begin with that the big two didn't know what to do and just went silly for a decade after that, and then filed for bankruptcy.
well, it's just funny. It's funny because I I hadn't read this in a while. I remembered a joke in it, and I decided to tell Melissa about it, but it made me nostalgic for it. Um, this was the first in a run by J. Michael Straczynski, who some people might know as the writer of Babylon 5.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize while reading it back when I first found it
Can you hold
that
that up again? Sorry.
no
Now I got
problem.
you up. Cool.
Yeah, Coming Home
It's nice art.
is oh yeah. So the J. Scott Campbell did the covers, and J. Romita Jr. did the art. Um, I personally like J. Michael Straczynski's voice a lot, because he did a good job of making Peter Parker feel like a continuation of Stan Lee's version of the character, like
Hmm.
more adult, but basically like, this kind of um, this guy that like that really feels a sense of responsibility with the power that he has, and him being like kind of a different type of hero that like, while the Avengers are out saving the world, he's
Hmm.
teaching inner city kids chemistry and like trying to reach out to people at an individual level feels more relatable.
Yeah.
But anyway, but this is just a good like this is a really good thing for those who like esoteric like themes and ideas. Because the basic premise is that Ezekiel, who is this guy who does this ritual sacrifice thing to himself, has spider powers, and he finds out that there's this vampire person who is sucking the totemic power from people. So like their Jungian essence.
Wait, is this the?
Kind of-
They're making the movie on this right now, and the trailer just dropped for that, right?
No, that's That's a different.
Oh, that's
We'll,
Morbius.
we'll have to talk about that later because
I know.
I haven't.
That's hot.
I couldn't even bring myself to watch it because Anyway, so yeah, so for later time.
Yeah.
But anyway, but no, this
But
is
that's settled.
Moreland is the villain in this book, and the idea is that so that Ezekiel reaches out to Spider-Man, like when, as I'm saying, like when he's like in this kind of like he's kind of in this reverie for Queens. He's coming back to Queens for the first time in a while. I don't know what happened before this book, but he starts working at this high school. There's this whole thing about like school shootings and bullies and stuff that happens intermittently. But then he has to face Moreland, and Ezekiel tells him basically like, this isn't the type of bad guy that you can just like fight. This is like an ancient evil that's pursuing you, and it actually like on a symbolic level deals with okay, what on a spiritual level was it the spider that chose to bite you and give you power, or was it the accidental scientific like blind process that made you who you are? And I'm like, okay, college or postgraduate John understands this on a way deeper level than high school John did. So it's a really good it's a really great example of how a modernist fantasy thing can reduce an argument to just this like hieroglyphic level, and you can just look and push play. How does this work? And so it was just I just bring that up because it's a good example of really good writing being done in before. To me, there was a overhaul of Marvel where there was a lot more. Okay, we need to make this relevant to teenagers and young and all ages again. We can't just have like all these disparate like we need brand unity. We need like 4 Star Wars comics because Star Wars is coming out. Like it felt like to me after a while there was not really much attention paid to individual characters and individual character arcs. And so but we could dive into that at a later date. For those who are interested in esoteric topics, pick up Spider-Man Coming Home and see how it rings in your ears.
That sounds amazing. See, whenever I find, and there are so many people like this, I find articulate, well-read, thoughtful, mature people who read Spider-Man. They can get me to really like it just on getting me to hang on the expressions that they have for the like the way that they formulate their thoughts on it, and it does make me want to check it out. And I know it can't all just be blowing smoke. I'm sure if I tried it, I would like it. So can't hate. But yeah, this is part of this show. I suspect will be some sort of conversion therapy, I guess, to learning how to.
Which, like I said, is funny because I don't actually subscribe to comics. I don't any of them anymore.
Yeah.
The last book that I read was Walking Dead.
Oh yeah. Did you finish it? Did you get to the end?
No, so the first trade paperback I feel like is a masterpiece. It's just it's almost like a good like novelette, like it's a good piece unto itself.
Yeah.
And you start getting into oh, okay, this is a good like Monster of the Week book in the sense that like they
Mhm.
just keep moving from like setting to setting, and there's a new, almost like the Odyssey, you know, where like okay, there's a new challenge, like whether it's in the Odyssey it's new monsters, every time, or a new demigod or something that he's dealing with. It's similar in that like he keeps going, like there's a prison that they find that's abandoned, but then they find out there's some prisoners still there, or and that there's like zombies in the basement that they didn't know, like that type of thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But then it got to a point where like it really felt like a soap opera. It felt like, okay, what's the new weird problem that we can add to this? And it felt like there was a little less heart in it than there was when I first started reading it. Um, but eventually, like I said, like I started picking up, reading books like and novels again, or and like short stories, and then it was just kind of like, okay, I've moved on from this. I don't doubt that there is still good comics being published, and I certainly saw that there was an indie boom, and that there were
mm,
a lot of good self-published and indie published comics that were like more at my reading level and more at my interest.
yeah,
Um, but I just kind of moved on to starting to read short stories and novels again, and had kind of put it down.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think the best comic writers in the American industry, at least, have been um, people who are multiple, like I guess multidisciplinary, and
That's
were
a good
able
point.
to bring in, um, you know, like a fuller sense and appreciation of literature, and funnel it into this particular peculiar medium, and enrich it in ways that keep it from getting stale and self-referential. You know, the the Mark Millars and I don't know. I can't name a lot of people. The guy that wrote Watchmen, whatever that weirdo's name is. He wrote
Okay,
amazing stuff. I heard
I'm gonna
Swamp
I'm gonna
Thing
make
is
I'm gonna
incredible.
make my recommended reading list, and then in a future episode,
Yeah,
we'll,
that would be nice.
we'll have it out. It'll be a no holds barred
That'd be
Steel
really nice.
Cage deathmatch.
Yeah. This provides tension. This is the drama of the show. The drama portion.
And then hopefully we can crap on manga as an art form together, right? I can count on you.
Yeah.
I can count on you to have had all the same life experiences that I have that make me biased against that genre.
Yeah, for the most, yeah, yeah. Well, we lived through the same ridiculous eras, so there's that.
That is true.
Yeah.
But no, I think the main thing, like not to do this at a comprehensive level, but the main thing that poisoned me, I think, to anime and manga was, as somebody that likes, and this will come up in Mandalorian discussion and in other sci-fi fantasy discussions probably too, that I don't like the I really like the knight errant journeyman story. Like there is a goal, and we're going to go towards that thing. Anything that's more like, okay, what's happening this week, or there's something that's like the it's like a battle. Whole season is one battle, and that that happened to be with Dragon Ball Z,
Oh
which
yeah.
was a lot of kids' exposure back in the early aughts and the late 90s to anime. And it was just like, okay, there's a bad guy. Let's fight that bad guy for 5 episodes straight. That was not appealing to me in in any stretch. I liked the humor a lot in that show, but that was just kind of like, is this what this is like as a thing? Eventually, I did find anime that I like. Did very few, because again, it's a whole language to learn. It's a whole like
Yeah.
different like art style.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a world.
yeah, it's a different, yeah, and it's a different culture, obviously.
Yeah.
So, um, but yeah, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back for high school John.
Oh.
Um,
Well, there's Manga, well, I can't actually speak much to manga other than a few things, but anime, it's, when it's bad, it's very, very bad, and when it's good, it's incredibly good.
That is a great way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. Thankful for anime here, honestly, but just a few, just a few. Uh, Last time I checked into anime, I was watching the gigantic dudes, the naked, skinless men, bash into some weird steampunk castle, and I had to check out. It was the one that everyone was watching like 4 or 5 years ago, and it was trash. So,
So the two anime that I'll stand by, I actually watched with my grandmother. If that says anything about the type of anime that I like, um, and one of them is called Silver Spoon, and it's about a high school kid who runs away from home, and but um, to show how much higher their civilization is, he runs from one high school to another rather than getting in trouble. Um, and the other high school though is a like agrarian high school, so he runs from the city to this agrarian school, and it's all about him learning about farm life and discovering like it's this really like touching story of like this kid who has a lot of demons from his home life and is learning through like you know it's a very slice of life type of show. It's not like there's no like supernatural elements or anything in it,
yeah,
but it's just him learning how to uh, you know basically just a coming of age story, um,
yeah.
and with a little cast of characters in it.
I think anime and manga, they definitely that's the most popular genres, and they're the most uh, they if you're into that as a genre, they're pretty incredible.
And I think it was good to see one that didn't have the like unobtainable love interest as the main like source of the where the drama came from. I liked that it was more about you know I'm this it's this fish out of water story, and how can he take the negative of having run away from home, and how can this school and this group of friends that he has make it into a positive.
Yeah.
The other one, which is more like sci-fi and more like thriller, is called Erased. Um, and the idea behind it is that this character, the status quo is that he uh, he already has this low level kind of power where he can kind of see uh, like 15 minutes or not 15 minutes. I don't know how long the time is, but he can see like 5 minutes into the future, I think it is. And so when there's something that like really bad is about to happen around him, he's able to kind of prevent that from happening. But he's this kind of like 20 something, uh, like, like basically the traditional millennial in our, uh, you know, in our culture here.
Sure. Yeah.
Lives with his mom and works at this pizza place. But then you find out that when he was in middle school, there was this guy that would kidnap young girls, and that there were a couple girls from his class that got kidnapped, and a few of them showed up, wound up, like they found their bodies and everything. So all of a sudden, something happens. His mom is killed, and he finds out it was the same, perpetrator. I forget how he figures that out, but anyway. But then all of a sudden, he wakes up and he's in his middle school body. And it's his consciousness, his 26 or whatever year old consciousness. But I just thought it was interesting because it's not like he has any superpowers. There's just this idea that like he can fix something that has haunted him his whole life, and he has to figure out how to do it as a middle school kid. But it was just a really thoughtful exploration of like when you have like regrets in your life, and this idea that like he's been haunted by this thing his whole life, but should he really expect that like he could have done anything about it?
Yeah.
And it's a really beautiful exploration of a very character based. It's like a very good character study while still having a lot of like thrilling elements in it. Um, and that was just kind of something I came across like through recommendations as
Yeah.
like this is a particularly exceptional anime. But those are the only two that I've watched like all the way through. Those are the ones that I kind of sought out to watch, and I was uh, both of them were very entertaining.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think maybe that's for next episode. We might have to talk about the best way. I don't know, like maybe tackle a couple standout animes that have really
Yeah, I'll
impacted
write that
us.
down. Comics and anime.
Yeah.
Strider talk
Yeah.
discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's wrap it up here because I did. I thought we could always shoot for an hour, and of course, and we're just getting in the swing of things and learning our own paces. So it's not surprising that we went over a bit, but I want to thank everyone for hanging out in the chat and for checking us out. We're going to do this as often as we can, and this is I'm gonna actually this is on. Obviously, you're watching this on my YouTube channel, but we're gonna transition this over to the StriderTalk YouTube channel in the future. So make sure to follow at Talk Strider to get links for all that as we kind of make sure that that's up and running well. And also, that's a good place to go for the Strider store. So you can check out John's merchandise there, and
And
yeah,
I'm also hoping to have some of Matt's pieces on there too. So we're gonna iron that out and hopefully get that up as soon as possible. Because
yeah,
there was a working version of this site in another iteration, and so basically we just got to work out which items we want to uh, move over there, and which ones make the most sense to do, considering you already do your own kind of fine crafts and art on your own website. We don't want to replicate anything, just offer you a different platform. And so, yeah, I'm excited to uh, have this be a way that we can both talk about our arting lives and
yeah.
have the store be a way that we can bring more of that art to your wonderful homes. So, thank you for listening and for indulging us.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I just want to thank everyone again for checking us out, for giving us a try. Um, there's a lot of things competing for our time nowadays, even in terms of live streams on YouTube. But thanks for checking this one out, and we'll keep bringing out content to you. I'm gonna hit stop recording. So see you guys later. Thanks. Bye.
Bye bye.